again occurred at BMO Field. And I think that there's just one more 2016 exciting sports moment to come for the city, which of course is the winning of the Major League Soccer Championship, which will happen on December the 10th at BMO Field, where we're lucky enough to have a home team in a game that's being played in our own stadium at that time. You have to ask yourself how many of these exciting sports moments you could have in any one year, given the baseball moments we had and the Raptors moments, and of course even the Grey Cup game, which didn't feature a Toronto team, but certainly was a very exciting game. And the answer to that question is hopefully at least one more for 2016, which is a win by the Reds. And I just want to again extend to them my congratulations. I will, of course, continue to support them in any way that I can as the leader of this community, because I think I do so on behalf of the people of Toronto who are very proud of them. One other note in the category of unfinished business, I will, of course, be looking forward, probably with your help and that of social media, to photographic evidence of the fact that my good friend Mayor Denis Coderre of Montreal will be outfitting himself in a TFC jersey today. He swore to me he would never have to wear it. I didn't even bother to have to send him one, but we are making arrangements to make sure that he can keep his end of the bet, which also involved some smoked meat, which on my current eating program I'm not able to eat, but I'll share it with you. Can I just say a couple of words about today's discussions thus far? I'm very gratified by what's been going on today and by all the reports that led to today's discussion. This is an important beginning of a process as opposed to the end. But what's important about it is that after years of acknowledging that we have a budget problem today, and with the reports that are in front of us today and all the work that's been done to get here, we are finally beginning to take action to address it. As the streets and the expressways get more and more clogged by traffic, as transit gets more and more clogged up with too many people riding a system that's inadequate. Today, we actually begin to take action, I believe, on fighting congestion and building more transit. I have put forward significant elements of my plan to deal with the city's long-standing financial problems with a proposal to introduce tolls on the Gardiner Expressway and the Don Valley Parkway, to introduce a hotel tax like those that are used in many, many other cities in the world, and to do away with the vacant property tax rebate, just to name three measures. These are measures which do, in fact, represent what the city manager called today a good start. And it's a good start on the challenges facing our city, and I would say that is especially true of the road tolls, which will honestly and fairly and finally allow us to actually get on with building some of the projects that councils in the past have taken great pleasure and pride in approving, but with no money attached, no ability to pay. And this is going to be necessary in order to tame these outrageous traffic conditions. So I will look forward to the moving forward of these ideas by the Executive Committee today, hopefully, and then the work that has to continue to be done by our City Manager, Peter Wallace, and by our Toronto Public Service. I'm glad that we're having a good, open, lengthy discussion about this, with more to come. And I reiterate in that context something that I've said before. To those who are opposed to these proposed measures, either here or at places like Queen's Park, I think that honesty and the basic elements of leadership require that they have to deal with two questions. Number one, if they are opposed to road tolls and some of these other measures as a means of paying for some of these kinds of things, I think they have an obligation to spell out what they would use instead, and I think that's an absolute obligation of leadership. Or, number two, to indicate honestly to the public that they would have no intention of supporting the measures that I believe are absolutely necessary to relieve traffic, particularly the building of transit. If people want to stand up and say, we're not going to get any transit, that's just it, there is no money, and there should be no money coming from the City of Toronto and 905 taxpayers who use these highways, that's a position that somebody could take, and I just think they have to be honest enough to do so. So on that note, I will just say that I look forward to the continuation of these discussions for the balance of today, and turn it over to your questions.
Mayor, so many people, I mean, there's so many taxes that are under consideration at this point. You've got to understand that a lot of people are not going to be happy about that.
I understand that when you're taking leadership, especially when it comes to asking people to pay more to build the kind of city we need to build going forward, there's been nothing I could put forward There's not a single suggestion I could put forward that involves taking in the money necessary to build this transit to fix the traffic that is going to be universally popular. And I fully understand people are struggling out there, but it doesn't change my obligation, which is to say to those very same people that if you want to live in a city, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now, that is so much worse in terms of its congestion, in terms of its inability to house people on any kind of rational basis in the city, in terms of its lack of appropriate public infrastructure, if you want to go on for 25 more years kicking stuff down the road, which previous city councils have done, then we could just not have this discussion. But I'm not prepared to be that kind of mayor, and I think most people, when they think about it, they want to build the transit. They know we need to build the transit, and they know most of all the transit isn't free. And I'm relying on those people to come forward, and they have been in terms of their personal response to me when I've been out at a lot of big crowd events where you think that's the kind of place, especially at somewhere like a soccer game where people may have had a couple of liquid refreshments and they're uninhibited in terms of their commentary on these things. And I won't tell you there haven't been a couple of people who have, said a word or two about road tolls, but the vast majority of people, either quietly or quite vocally, have said to me, thank goodness somebody's actually standing up and saying that if we want to get on with building the transit and fixing the traffic, we understand it's not free, and that you're being honest about how you're proposing to pay for a chunk of it, and I think people respect that.
Is this package the end for revenue tools? I mean, there are an awful lot more tools that your city manager has suggested the city really needs. You picked a few of them. Do you anticipate coming back to this well a year or two, or maybe if you're lucky in the election 3 later to add some more to this?
The city manager indicated that what we had talked about, particularly in my own speech where I combined some things that had to do with the long-term capital needs of the city to build transit, to fix traffic, and also the operating needs, that these measures were a good start. And I'd like to sort of leave it at that and get on with a good start, which is a better start than the no start that we've had for many, many years where people have just abdicated this responsibility. And so I'd like to get on with it. I'd also like to get on at the same time, and I recognize and accept this responsibility with working as hard as I can, and I work every day on this, finding ways to modernize the city government, to streamline it, to make it more efficient, to find savings. I do not, as you know, accept the criticism of those who say that to have asked people in the departments and agencies of the city to find some efficiencies was somehow a wrong-headed thing to do. It was absolutely the right thing to do, and it will be done again next year under my leadership because we have to keep doing that. So I would say let's take this one step at a time, and I'm very gratified that the city manager and many other people out there who are objective observers of the city say that what we're trying to do here is a courageous, good start, and I'll take a courageous, good start and move that forward and get that done before I start to worry about what else we're going to do on any which side of the city's financial problems.
So, Mr. Mayor, you will shut down discussion of asking the province for a shared income tax or sales taxes, other things?
No. To be clear, I mean, we can make those requests. I will be surprised, based on the discussions I've had to date, if somebody says, oh, what a terrific idea, let's get on with that.
Well,
because
you do have the power to bring any, if someone wants to discuss that, get more.
Which one are you talking about?
Parking levy, these kind of.
I gave my own analysis based on the discussions I've had over the last number of months about the parking levy and why it was something that sort of seemed at first blush to be a better idea than it was when you actually considered some of the practical questions. And so we have the power to levy that now if we wanted to, and I just chose to go with something else in terms of my own recommendation. And I'm the mayor, but I don't lead a majority government. I have to go and persuade people to support me. And so I would just say to you on that one, I made a choice, as I did on a choice not to reiterate or reintroduce the car tax, the car tax. I just feel that is something that, whatever its merits or demerits may be, it's been rendered toxic, and that it would lead to a debate that would have less chance of success. But I think as far as these requests to the province with respect to other kinds of taxation, I've had enough discussions to kind of have a sense that those aren't going to be met with any kind of great acclaim at the provincial level or the federal level. But if it comes to asking one more time, I have no hesitation, and I would ask sincerely about, because I think those things are useful in the context of, being ways in which you could address some of our financial problems, but I don't expect a positive response.
A couple more questions. For next year, the 2017 budget, the city manager indicated in there that he'll again be presenting a budget that's not yet balanced and asking council to make a series of choices. We know that there's still a gap despite some savings that we've heard about so far that departments have found. So how do you suggest council move forward with filling the rest of that gap?
Well, I think the same way we have every other year, and I would just say to you that if you look at when you see the documentation next week, and I've seen sort of various iterations of it because he's been keeping me posted. I've been working hard personally on this with Councillor Crawford and others for months. And if you look at what's left by way of a residual, hole in the budget that has to be addressed, it is before a lot of these potential revenue measures that we've been talking about and that I specifically addressed in my remarks of last week, like the hotel tax. And it's also before we take a look at some of the other measures that could exist to constrain expenditure. And there's a whole bunch of options that are going to be presented with respect to the latter, expenditure constraint, many of which I would say right now, just having seen some of these lists as they've come forward from departments and agencies as they looked at the 2.6% request are unacceptable to me. But having said all that, that's the discussion that has to go on now at the Budget Committee, and there are public hearings to be held, and so the city staff is going to present its budget with the gap. The gap is not inconsiderable, but it's also not that big, and so I'm optimistic that between all these different things we can get it resolved, and we'll have it done in plenty of time for the Council to consider the budget in February.
Mr. Mayor, there were a lot of commuters this morning who arrived at Wilson Station in their cars and were surprised to find that there were barricades in front of the parking lot that they parked at for years. I know that it's in the plans to sell that land and to develop it. I guess my question for you would be, on behalf of them, how do you expect to convince drivers, especially out-of-towners, to come into the outskirts of the city, park, and take public transit if they're running out of places to put their vehicles?
I can't speak to the timing of the communication of that information to the commuters who use those lots. I guess about 70% of them come from 905, and that's neither here nor there, but that's the fact. I can tell you that the TTC itself declared this land surplus years ago. It's been through an elaborate process where Build Toronto has decided what to do with it, and so the notion that nobody would have known before now that the lot might be lost temporarily to commuters is something that I really can't explain, and I don't think that's satisfactory. There should have been better explanation offered by somebody as to the fact that this lot was going to go out of service. I will say that in the coming period of time, both this particular piece of land will have more parking associated with it when it's redeveloped. Yorkdale will have coming on stream in the very short term. In fact, it's just running a bit late, 1,000 more parking spaces, and there are hundreds more parking spaces that are coming available at the new subway stops on the subway extension, which is due to open next year. And so I would say that while I'm not satisfied with the communication that led to people being surprised today by that development, I will say that I think the overall supply of parking, in fact, will be increased, and that people always have the option as well of taking transit and not using their car at all, especially in the 416. So I am sorry they faced that sudden revelation, if that's indeed what it was, but it wasn't because the decision was taken suddenly. In fact, the decision to declare the land surplus by the TTC was taken years ago.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.